Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome Pastor Joel Seymour. Thank you very much for being part of our Vibrant Church Conference. And today we are introducing neighboring, building relationships, and how congregations can be part of a movement to love our neighbors. And I'm going to share my screen. We have a PowerPoint to kind of guide us through the day.
Sounds good. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Diane.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to be working with you again. It's been a while, so there we go.
We miss you around here. So.
Well, yeah, and it was a strange time to leave and then have 2020 happen.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So missing a lot of connections myself, but I actually do miss Lancaster as well, and all the partnerships that we grew through this Art of Neighboring task force. So with that, I will ask that Pastor Joel introduce himself, tell us a little bit about you and your congregation in Lancaster.
Yeah, so Joel Seymour, and I'm from the Fairfield County area, which is central Ohio, but moved back to this area 22 years ago after college. Went and helped plant a church in Northwest Ohio, and then moved here 22 years ago and started the Lancaster Vineyard Church, a series of small groups that then eventually we began meeting on Sundays, and vibrant congregation engaged in the city, thriving food pantry, and just to build our life here. You know, when my wife and I moved here, we didn't have kids yet, and we've had kids here, and our kids have went through the school system, and so that's helped us engage with the city. And so here we are 22 years later. I can't believe it.
Yes, time flies.
Yes.
And for all of you tuning in today, I am Deacon Diane Schwiger-Alexander, and I am part of the Southern Ohio Synod Vibrant Church Conference Task Force. And this is the third in a series of workshops for our lay leaders and rostered leaders as well. And again, today we're going to focus on neighboring.
Yeah.
Yes. So just kind of a quick history here. Everything that Pastor Joel and I are talking about today is based on The Art of Neighboring, which is a book and a website full of resources. It started in Colorado about 10 years ago with 21 churches. They united to start a neighboring movement in their community. They kept things simple and and challenged people in their congregations to take the next small step to literally get to know their neighbors, those living right next door. And the movement has spread, and to date there's over 1,000 churches, and I'm guessing many more than that, because I'm not sure how up to date the website is actually, but on that number. But there are many churches across the country who are using the Art of Neighboring resources. So Pastor Joel, can you tell me how the movement started in Lancaster?
Yeah, actually, I know one of the co-authors, Jay Pathick, who's a pastor at Mile High Vineyard in Denver, Colorado, or Arvada, and he was just sharing a story how, like most pastors, he was in a minister association for the town, and one day they just decided to invite a city administrator there and just ask, what are the biggest needs of our city? And as the city administrator started talking, he essentially said something along the lines, I guess the best thing you could do is if you could just get the people at your churches to look after their neighbors, that would probably change a lot in our city. And after the city administrator left, the pastors feeling quite convicted, like, a city administrator just challenged us to have our people follow the great commandment of love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second part of that obviously is love your neighbor as yourself. And When Jay told me that, and I was looking for ways to engage in the city, I just thought, what if we started banding together as churches and then band together with other organizations and do the same? So we started, I think I sent out an invite to 15 pastors to simply do a book study on the Art of Neighboring book. And I think we had 12 actually do it. And so it was about the fall of, I believe, 2012 when we did that. And it probably took us 8 weeks to get through the book. And we just slowly went through it. And we really liked it. And we got done. And we're like, okay, that was a good book. Now what? You know, I mean,
Right.
is it just like, hey, we had a good time studying the book and move on, or we're going to do something? And we made the decision to go talk to the mayor. And so two of us, myself and a pastor from another church, went and talked to the mayor. And the mayor was excited. And he said, I tell you what, I'd like to have a meeting. I want to invite all the pastors in the county. So that's 179 churches in our county.
Wow.
I want to invite them all. And so he literally on city letterhead sends out this invite to all the pastors and says, what I want to talk to you about is what it would take to get folks to obey Jesus's command to love their neighbors as themselves. And so again, it's this convicting thing, like the mayor is calling pastors to encourage us to disciple our people to love their neighbors. And so we had that meeting, and the mayor spoke, our police chief spoke. I ended up leading it, a section of it, and we invited, all these people.
Wonderful. Yes, I was actually part of that meeting.
Yeah.
I hadn't been in Lancaster or at St. Peter's for very long, and but the letter came to the office, and so it was handed to me by the pastor saying, "Go check this out." And so I understand how the movement got started from there.
I think one of the secrets to it was probably that the mayor sent it, that
Right.
it wasn't and I'm not being derogatory on anybody here, but it wasn't the mega church that was sending out the invitation. It wasn't a pastor of a up and coming new church in town sending it. It wasn't even the revered, kind of pastor that everybody looks up to in the city. It was a mayor, and we met at City Hall, which is a neutral site. And I think that made it easier for pastors to attend. So
Right.
I think we had probably over 60 folks, I think, at that first one.
Yeah.
And then just began to meet quarterly after that.
Right. So what was the purpose for Art of Neighboring in Lancaster?
So in the very, very beginning, it was pretty simple. It was pretty grassroots. It was just simply to promote neighbors getting to know their neighbors. I mean, really, honestly, it's just like we would give out, we called it it was the block map, but we called it kind of the chart of shame, because it was just this kind of tic-tac-toe, square thing. And it was, and you're supposed to write down all the names of the people around you. Like you're in the middle house and you write down all the names. And we called it the chart of shame because usually you're like, oh man, I don't know the person that lives behind me. What's their first name? And, and we realized, like, we're not going to love anybody unless we actually know them. And so in the beginning, it was simply challenging the people there to get their people in their congregations to do that, to get to know the people around them. We ended up then in that first one deciding to promote a shared sermon series. And I think we had 8 or 9 churches that did that. So they actually shared a sermon series where they talked on neighboring. So you had 8 or 9 churches in the city do the same talks, roughly, of what it means to be a good neighbor. And then the outgrowth, kind of the win of that was to get some of our church folks to actually host block parties in their neighborhood, or even if that was too big of a term, just a cookout for the neighbors right around them, to help just build some relationships. So that was kind of the purpose in the beginning, is just grassroots, non-event driven, no budget, just get neighbors to learn to be good neighbors.
Yes, I remember sharing in my congregation that block map, the magnet.
Yeah.
You see the picture here. Here's the book, and then the magnet. And it is really kind of shocking when you have to stop and think, like, of all the homes around me, who do I really know? What do I know about them? And I know we talked a lot in our first meetings about how even us serving in the church, go home, pull the car in the garage and shut the garage door down, and we go into the house, right? Never
Yeah.
to emerge until we leave the garage again tomorrow. And that doesn't promote neighborliness.
No,
Right?
no, and even think about our modern house designs. I mean, so many, especially if you live in a development, the porches are gone or they're reduced in size. Half the time, the garage is out front more of even the house. You have a fence in the backyard, but it's a privacy fence, and so you literally can wake up in the morning, go to work, come home at night, and never see a soul around you. And that's not good for our cities. It's not good for our towns.
Yes.
And it's obviously not good for our faith, since we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I think one of the things we discovered, Diane, early on was just this sense of, in church world, we can, the Good Samaritan, love that story. But it's almost like the church has taken that to the nth degree of, the Good Samaritan means you love everyone, which is true. I mean, that's what Jesus was trying to communicate. You love even those that aren't like you or the stranger.
Right.
The problem is we've made it so generic, love everyone. It means really we love no one in essence. If I can't love the person in the house 50 feet from me, there's a problem there,
Right.
So we just really tried to focus. What does it mean to love my actual neighbor?
Right. Right. So talking about some of those resources, everybody can visit the Art of Neighboring website /resources. And these next two slides, we're going to just kind of talk through the ones we're familiar with, and actually they're all out there. And you'd already mentioned the 3-week sermon series, and and the congregations that took part in that in Lancaster. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's good outlines there, and you can actually, so one of the co-authors, Dave Runyon, actually pivoted from pastoring a church to he's actually running a neighboring movement around Denver, all the different suburbs, and he has a sermon series that you can watch and then some outlines, and so it works out well, because then you can obviously create it, make it your own. And I found the topics were very, very good and very timely, very, very, very practical. So every person in the church would leave with at least one thing they're going to do that week. Maybe it's fill out the block map, like you were sharing on that previous slide. So maybe it's just simply that's what they're supposed to do, name each person around them, and then begin to get into deeper conversations. Here's what I found out, Diane, is about 3 weeks in, and we actually incorporated our small groups in it, and I see we have a small group study on there too, so we incorporated our small groups. What we learned was, and I rarely do this because I have everything planned out, I ended up extending the sermon series, because what I realized was, here's how messed up our culture is we were asking people, or I guess here's what happened. I had small group leaders during the group or the sermon series come to me and say, Joel, we're having a weird discussion in our group, because I'm saying, hey, what's the most loving thing you could do for your neighbor? And literally some of the answers that people were giving is like, well, if we're supposed to love them like we love ourselves, or, how we want to be treated, I just want to be left alone. And so the most loving thing I could do is it's not get to know my neighbor. It's like, oh my gosh, we got a problem here. And so I actually had to spend a couple more, three weeks was not enough for our church. I think I almost doubled. I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. And just to hammer down, like, no, this is what Jesus calls us, relationships. And this is the kingdom of God. And us being a blessed community that then blesses those around us, and you got it. That only happens if you know people, and So yeah, those are two great resources. I know too, if any of your folks have something like Right Now Media, they also have a Art of Neighboring study on there too. So it's getting out. So you can get the free videos and stuff here, and then I think Right Now even has deeper ones. So this message is beginning to get out, and then they have a good just starting point. I mean, it's blow by blow on how to start a joint church movement. So it's just kind of a get some pastors together, begin to study this, and then it tells you like, here's the next thing to do, and here's the next thing to do. And almost all of them have you connecting with the mayor to some degree, or your city administrator, depending how your city's set up,
Right.
and beginning to get government officials in. I think I know you knew this in Lancaster. Folks who work in the government love their city. They have programs, they have some resources, but they lack people, they lack volunteers, and some horsepower. And the church has that. And so I have found most government, city, school leaders are all for churches serving their community and welcome that. So we've just had a good time in our city and our county connecting with government and organizations.
Yes, it was a unique experience for me to be part of a kind of church-based, task force.
Yeah.
And then, but we had the mayor and, the sheriff and the police chief and, the school superintendent and principals and people from all the social service agencies kind of in and out over the years, working with us and we with them to really move the art of neighboring into kind of a real world, practical, get up and do it kind of movement. So yes, so there's the 6-week Bible study we have, and then like you said, that starting a joint church movement is kind of a step-by-step guide. And then we have the block map that we've already kind of talked about, that chart of shame, where really, it opens your eyes to what's really happening in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, if the folks that are watching right now want to just take the first step, that would be a great first step when this video is done, is make their own block map like that, make a tic-tac-toe, picture their own house in the middle, and then just begin to go around and say, what are the names of the neighbors around me? What's something I know through a conversation about them, and write that down on each. And that can't be that they have a red car, because if you see the red car, it has to be something you picked up on conversation. And then if you want to go one more step, you just write down like, what's something like a deeply held value or a dream or a hurt, getting way under the surface of. And we're not going to have that with every neighbor by any stretch of imagination, but by doing that, it just lets us see that we may have zero relationship with, because we don't even know their names, or even the ones we do are fairly superficial, that we have not really got under the surface with the people that live closest to us.
You're right, yes. I know for me personally in Lancaster, I lived in a condo community. There were monthly social events, but even with that, do you know anybody deeper than a name?
Yeah.
So it's important. And then of course we fast forward into, 2019, I know Art of Neighboring before I left Lancaster was kind of revisioning. And I'll ask you to talk about that, and then also too into 2020 and how all of our neighboring and relationships have been impacted and with COVID.
Yeah, so we've actually I'll start with the revisioning. We've revisioned probably twice. So we went a few years with this grassroots movement, which was great. Encouraging people to do block parties and cookouts in the summer is just an easy way to get to know their neighbors. But we realized it's hard to sustain momentum. There isn't necessarily a scorecard unless we all just kept track at all of our churches and organizations and businesses, like, well, how many how many block parties did each person have, or whatever. I mean, it's a hard thing and hard to get momentum. And so we decided we needed a focus as organizations. And by now we were churches, we were schools, we were social service organizations, and we were businesses, at least a couple that were meeting. And we thought, what is a neutral thing we could pick to get behind? I mean, instead of just picking one of our organizations, we thought that might be a little self-serving. We thought, what's an organization? And we felt like the schools were something universal, that everybody wants to see schools succeed. And so I think that was probably 2015, 2016 when we did that. And so just got behind schools. And so you already mentioned, we were talking before we started recording, that one of the schools down from the church you were serving at the time, you were part of the ice cream giveaway we did there. And so that was the day after school. Every employee at that building had an ice cream sundae from one of the locally known, really well-known ice cream shops in town. And so we served it. We donned our little hats and our gloves and our scoops, and we did that. There's 750 employees at Lancaster City Schools, and so we had, I think, 7 churches participate in that, where they all took time during their service or right after a service, and we had printed labels on the envelopes with the name of the employees. This is from bus drivers, janitors, school administrators, teachers, everybody in between, their name and what they did. So it might be, John Smith, bus driver. And so our people in our churches would write personal thank you notes for what they did. We would do a big pep rally with the schools in the beginning, and so the year. So that was a revisioning, just to get behind an organization and allow us to do something together as churches, organizations that were meeting at these quarterly neighboring meetings. The revisioning last year was, we realized we're not capturing businesses as well, and so we have this belief that a city is made up of nonprofit organizations and churches. It has government and it has business, and where all of those excel and overlap in the middle, that raises the peace of a city. And so we need good government. I got to be sure if I come home and people who don't own my home are living in it, I gotta have some recourse for that. And so good government is good for that. And if my house catches on fire, I gotta have somebody put it out. So that's good. But good government has to have good businesses, because you got to have tax money to pay for those things. And then we need nonprofits to kind of be a safety net for anybody that falls through the cracks, but also to kind of keep us the charitable side and the loving side of humanity pushed forward. And so we were failing at the business side. So our goal in 2020 was to engage more businesses. That's been a little harder. Things changed, although we've done one meeting at a business, and what we've decided is to move our meetings to businesses, locally owned ones, and have the owner explain the business to us and share. And so we've had one. There was a new downtown coffee shop opened. They had revamped an older coffee shop and totally gutted it and redid it, and it's the second major restaurant this owner has done in Lancaster downtown, and he really started the revitalization downtown a few years ago, and so this is his new venture. And so right after quarantine, we actually were able to meet there, all in our masks and spread out, and he shared with us the story of that restaurant. So we're trying to engage business owners, and instead of saying come to us, we're actually going to them.
Wonderful. Yes. I was part of that revisioning, and it was kind of growing on what Art of Neighboring had done with schools, right? And then let's get to know our businesses and the business owners and the people there, and how we can also partner with them in serving and loving our neighbors. So I'm excited to hear it's still kind of happening, even though COVID has thrown us a curveball.
Yeah, in fact, our next one was supposed to be at a business, and they are not open yet for public. And then another business was still reluctant to have a crowd over 10 there, because we would probably have roughly 15 to 20, 25 sometimes. So we're doing Zoom at our next one just because, but we're going to keep hammering away. What we have found is locally owned businesses want the community to thrive, and they want to be engaged in these kind of things. It's just so often the times when we have our meetings or what we're doing doesn't facilitate making it easy for them to attend. And so
Right.
we're trying to make it easier. But I tell you, Diane, anytime I send out some through Art of Neighboring of one of the organizations has an issue or a need that there's not a program, businesses step up. I mean, most recent one was Big Brothers Big Sisters had a need to change how they meet with kids at the schools, and they needed activity boxes that were full of individually wrapped things because they used to share everything.
Right.
Now they need their own. And I sent that email out, and it's $300 a kit, and I don't know how many kits went. I mean, I don't know, probably 10, 12 just in minutes. And it was businesses that are on our list saying, I'll supply one, I'll supply two. And so if we can engage them, they want to serve the city. So that's what we're trying to do.
That's wonderful to hear. So for anybody who is wondering how to address neighboring in our COVID-19 days, Art of Neighboring website has put out a resource, a toolkit for that, and has all sorts of tips to just help in the transition, right?
Yeah, and depending where you're at in the country, or depending, how your city feels, even cities have different feels, and I'm sure your listeners know that I talk to some people in cities in Ohio, and they're very, very open, and people aren't cautious hardly at all. And then you can talk to other cities, and they're pretty locked down still. And so this was originally done when everything was kind of quarantined, and so it's at its safest, most cautious level. But I mean, it's the same principles. It's just doing things in ways that are safer. And it may be, if it's an elderly neighbor, going to their door with a mask, knocking on the door, and then backing away from the door to check in on them. It's doing, it's getting cooler right now, Diane. And one of the things you could do is do we've done this with our neighbors, is you can do a backyard fire, but you're all separated out, or you're sitting at the bottom of your driveways talking, and somebody brings a guitar. It's doing a Zoom trivia night with your neighbors, those kind of ideas.
Right. And all of those are possible once you start filling out that block,
Exactly.
and getting to know people. But even in days of crisis, get to know them, right? Is the newspaper at the sidewalk, walk it up to them, ring the doorbell, step away, simple things just to check in on our neighbors. So,
and I think that's ripe right now, because we're so hungry for relationships because we've been stuck in our homes. And so even if you go, oh man, I wish I'd have started doing this before COVID to make it easier. Well, maybe not, but I think it's easy now because people are hungry, to get to know people. So just going up and saying, hey, my name's Joel, and man, I wish I'd have met you 5 years ago when you moved in. But just with COVID and everybody kind of hunkered down, just thought I'd come over and check in on you. And here's my name, here's my number. You need anything, let me know. Particularly the elderly, something simple like going and getting groceries for them, checking in on them in those ways. Or if there's other things they need, a prescription, something that can't get delivered, those are simple ways we can show Jesus's love to those around us.
Yes, and I know just maybe a week or two ago, we were out in our backyard, and our neighbor saw us in the backyard, and so she came out on her deck, and we probably visited for 25, 30 minutes, well into the dark, us standing in the yard and her on her deck, and it just taking those opportunities because people are around. And it's been a long time since we talked to anybody else other than the one living with us, right?
Right. And so that,
in person.
That gets old.
Right.
So, and what an opportunity, I think every age level can serve safely. So you think of the families on our streets whose kids are juggling a hybrid thing. So you got grade schoolers staying at home all day while mom and dad are working. And older neighbors could go safely check on them, wear the mask, knock on the door, just make sure they're okay, take a plate of cookies, whatever, just to check in on the kids. You could, parents may need help with rides, you know, so there's simple, just like non-committal levels to get involved, and then there's ways we could go deeper to help those around us during this time.
Right. Yeah. In the isolation, we just have to be a little more creative.
Yeah.
So that toolkit is there to help. So any last highlights you would like to share?
Oh, I mean, I just think, you know, I hate to use Nike philosophy, but part of it is just do it. It's just, you know, it's a crazy world right now, Diane. I mean, you know, where we're at politically, where we're at, you know, we're talking justice issues, we're talking COVID-19, and the level of anxiety people are facing, and then the level of tribalism. And we're not only isolating ourselves with COVID, we're isolating ourselves with our beliefs and demonizing other people. And there's just, all this is ratcheting up in our world. And you know, Jesus said it pretty simply: they'll know us by our love. And neighboring is one of the simplest ways to do that. It's just to show care, compassion, concern, get engaged with our neighbors, and that can begin to dial down, I think, the rhetoric. It can dial down the anxiety. It can begin to give us understanding for people who are different than us, or younger than us, older than us, vote differently than us, whatever, name just whatever the differences are. And just getting to know people and having friendship and relationship with them can dial that down. And then as believers, then hopefully the love and grace of Jesus comes across winsomely to them, so that they would see a different way even.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. One last slide for everybody. You can go to the Southern Ohio Synod website and click on the box that says Vibrant Church Conference to register for the full workshop. And Pastor Joel and I will kind of review again what we did today and add some more detail to that, and do a Q&A with everybody. So that workshop is November 14th at 10 a.m. So I thank everybody for listening and register. And I thank especially Pastor Joel for being with me this morning. It is still September when we record this, but and still working in plenty of unknowns in our time. But we look forward, both of us, I think, to being with everybody in November. And thank you so much for your time. To the Art of Neighboring Task Force for doing its work in Lancaster and sharing with us here throughout Southern Ohio Synod, and also to your congregation for allowing you to spend some time with me too.
Oh, it's great. I've always appreciated your heart, Diane, and the leader that you are, and just your love for people. And when you lived in this city and worked in this city, just the love that you had for the town. And we need more and more of that, you know. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, hopefully we can inspire more.
That's right. And maybe that's one last thing I would just say, as you were saying, any other words, the thing that comes to mind is just to remind those that are watching today that just God loves your town. God loves your city. He loves your township. He loves the rural road or the holler you may live in. It doesn't matter. He loves people, and he's placed you there for this season to love those around you. And so just remember that.
Yes. Thank you very much.